Names in the transfer portal that you have to know.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everyone, to a bonus episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. The transfer portal's all over the place, and this is your number one source to stay up to date with all the biggest names, everyone that you need to know that is in the transfer portal. We've got you covered, so let's hop right into it. We'll get to a bevy of names, all those listed here, as you can see on YouTube, and several more. How about Jacoby Mathews, safety at Texas A&M? Our Locked On Texas A&M host Andrew Stefaniak talked about that on his show recently. This is a guy who is going to court some big-time offers. Oregon and Florida State were the two teams initially tied to him, but more could be in the mix.
Texas A&M safety Jacoby Mathews has officially entered his name in the transfer portal. We found out a while back that he planned to put his name in the portal, but when it opened on the 16th, he made it official that he will no longer be a part of the Texas A&M football program. A player that last season at times was a bright spot in a not good secondary for the Aggies. The secondary was the number one issue for Texas A&M last year, aside from, in all honesty, offensive line play. And you lose a guy in Mathews who many had written in as a starter this year. Now, he did announce a while back that he planned to leave. So, of course, many had already written him off, and we're starting to figure out, hey, who's going to be the next guy up in the safety room? Coach Uggo did a good job bringing in players via the portal. You feel good about this room going forward, but Mathews is a guy who's played in a lot of games, former top 50 recruit in the composite rankings, highly, highly touted guy at high school, talented football player that is going to make another coach very happy somewhere in the country. It's going to be interesting to see where he ends up. A kid from Louisiana, does he go back home? Does he find somewhere else to play? Going to be very interesting. But Jacoby Mathews is a good football player that is going to be missed at Texas A&M thanks to the upside he possessed.
Remember this in the spring transfer portal window. SEC players cannot transfer to other SEC schools. So he is going to be going somewhere outside the SEC. I'm not sure whether that applies to Oklahoma and Texas, who are still currently members of the Big 12 Conference. He could go there and then play in the SEC for the Longhorns or the Sooners next year. But Oregon and Florida State, Big 10 and ACC, no such problems right there. Former 5-star recruit, a guy to definitely keep an eye on. What about Colorado? They have been perhaps the quintessential example of how much you can do in the transfer portal, and they've been one of the noisiest teams, and they continue to be just that.
Colorado safety Myles Slusher has decided to enter his name into the college football transfer portal. I'm Kevin Borba, host of Locked On Buffs. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about what your team could possibly be getting in Myles Slusher. Prior to joining the Colorado Buffaloes in 2023, he spent 3 seasons at Arkansas, where he played quite a bit. He had 15 starts, recorded 93 tackles, 9 tackles for a loss, 2.5 sacks, and also grabbed 2 picks. His time in Arkansas ended in a weird fashion, but he came to Colorado as someone who was expected to be a starter, expected to be a key player on the defense, and he was that for the first game. He made the game-winning tackle against TCU, but due to injuries, he only played in 3 games the rest of the season and finished the year with 17 tackles and 1 sack. He's a former 4-star recruit that ranked as the 121st player in the country, number 8 safety in the country, and the number 2 player in the state of Oklahoma as a recruit out of Broken Arrow. So now that he's back in the portal, he should command quite the market. He should draw interest from some Power 5 programs. He's a starting caliber player, really savvy player, and realistically just needs to stay healthy to have an impact for your team.
So if you're a team out there, or a fan of a team, I should say, I don't know how many coaches listen to or watch the show. I hope the number's really high. But anyway, if you're looking for a starting caliber guy, Slusher can be that. Now, the injury concern might ward off some teams. So there could be a risk-reward calculation for a coaching staff, and you need to incorporate your medical team into the evaluation of, okay, how healthy is this guy? What can we get out of him? Another question you always have when players get injured, but they come back to finish their careers or they continue their careers, are they the same? I remember most notably in the NBA, DeMarcus Cousins, ruptured his Achilles, and when he came back, he wasn't the same guy. He was still good. He was still a player you wanted on your team, but was he the same guy that, was a centerpiece of the Sacramento Kings for a little while? Not that they were any good, but he was putting up 26, 13, and 2 blocks every game. And that's not something he was able to do post-injury. So that's the question there with Slusher. Here's another question, and I'm talking about him more on tomorrow's show. Cormani McClain is in the transfer portal. Do you remember that name? You should remember that name because Cormani McClain was the number 1 cornerback prospect coming out of high school in the 2023 class. He was with the Buffs this past season. Played some, but Deion Sanders was pretty vocal when asked about him that, hey, he wasn't ready to play yet. Well, he thinks he could find an option somewhere else that is better as it pertains to his playing time because he's not going to be a Buffalo anymore. So a couple members out of the Colorado secondary, maybe they would try to get into the Jacoby Mathews sweepstakes, losing a couple of guys on the back end of their defense there. Certainly that's a unit headlined by Travis Hunter that had its struggles last year. Hunter was really the lone bright spot consistently. As you heard Kevin talking about, Slusher was good until he got hurt. Shiloh Sanders is a pretty solid player, but overall, Colorado needs help defensively. So they do need some work on the offensive side, but certainly the defense was the worst of their 2 sides of the ball last year. Their offensive line was terrible, but the rest of their offense really was overall pretty darn solid. So those are the transfers on the defensive side of the ball that you should be aware of right here, right now. What about the other side of the ball? There's a quarterback in the transfer portal, and guess what? He's not from Ohio State. I've been told that I have a competitive side, that I'm a competitive person, and my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times, including on my phone. This one right here. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not 1, not 2, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. The best part is messing with your friends. You can charge them rent on iconic properties just like classic Monopoly, and the leaderboards show you who the biggest Monopoly tycoon really is. It's not just your competitive side that'll love it though. You can team up with friends and play with people all around the world to earn huge rewards. So get in on the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. I have several times on this show discussed that I feel like it's inevitable an Ohio State quarterback is going to enter the transfer portal. You have 5 guys who are starting caliber. They can't all play. You won't see more than 2, maybe 3 on the field in 2024. Are there 2 guys there that are willing to just sit and not play at all? Well, so far, we haven't seen a signal caller from Columbus enter his name into the transfer portal. We have seen one out of Coral Gables.
Jacoby Brown has entered the transfer portal. I am Alex Dono from Locked On Canes. Former Miami Hurricanes quarterback Jacoby Brown is now in the portal with 3 years of eligibility remaining. This is a player, I'm sorry for Miami to lose him. Of course, was not going to be the starting quarterback this season with Cam Ward now in South Florida, but Brown is someone who has very high upside and has continued to develop since arriving at Miami since 2022. Had a really good spring game this past weekend, really flashed there. Brown is already a tremendous runner from the quarterback position. He's big and strong at 6'4", around 230 pounds, has great instincts as a runner, and he's got a strong arm as a passer. He's been developing more consistency with his deep throws. Not a finished product yet, but telling you, with 3 years of eligibility remaining, Jacoby Brown's next team is getting a player with very high potential as a future starter in college football.
A future starter in college football. I didn't think there'd be many of those in the transfer portal. I figured there'd be perhaps a couple, most notably from Ohio State. All right, I'll get off that point already. But Brown is someone who, if you have the infrastructure to develop Jacoby Brown or give him an opportunity, or let's say, here's a team to keep an eye on here. Mississippi State. Jeff Lebby, new offensive former offensive coordinator from Oklahoma, now the head coach with the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Do you have any expectations in year one? No, you shouldn't. I think Mississippi State, along with Vanderbilt, are going to be the bottom 2 teams in the SEC this year. But that's part of the process. Everyone understands in Starkville that the Bulldogs are not going to be a great team this year. So if you bring in a quarterback who has a lot of upside but needs experience, needs reps, needs an opportunity to grow as your program grows, that's the sort of place where Jacoby Brown could be a really, really good fit. Sure, there are other options in which Brown could go somewhere and fit into a system like that and fit along a program's timeline. But I just think about Mississippi State off the top of my head. I'm just saying that could absolutely work. Ole Miss has had a great transfer portal this offseason, but it doesn't all go the way you want it to.
Joshua Harris has entered the transfer portal. Hi, I'm Stephen Willis with Locked On Ole Miss. Josh Harris is a mountain of a man that played a little last season for Ole Miss. The former four-star recruit was brought in to play as a true 3-4 nose guard before Pete Golding was named defensive coordinator. And once Walter Nolan came in, kind of became surplus to requirements. His new team will be getting a true 3-4 nose guard that is really good versus the run and is hard to move off the line of scrimmage. A player that will play all out when he is on the field.
Now, when I first heard this, my thought immediately went to who? Hugh Freeze and Auburn, because he has said publicly that Auburn wants to go out and get better along the defensive line in the spring transfer portal window. But what did I say earlier in this bonus show? You can't do that in the SEC. So that means he is going to a Big Ten, ACC, or a Big 12 school, maybe even a high-end group of 5. But Josh Harris, you don't find many guys that have got his raw size that are just going to be sitting out there available. So if your team needs a defensive tackle, Josh Harris is someone who's going to be able to come in and play for your team. He's got some experience in college football, as Stephen Willis of Locked On Ole Miss was just talking about, but certainly someone who could be poised for a bigger role if he finds the right landing spot. Let's go to the perimeter for our last transfer to highlight here on today's bonus show. And we got to go to Houston. I'm sorry to do it, Cougars fans, but this is the way of the world.
Cougs house, a tough one to announce, but it does sound like Sam Brown, star receiver from last season, is heading into the transfer portal. Sam was a big-time receptions guy, did not have a ton of touchdowns, but I'm your host of Locked On Cougs Park Ranger, and I, for one, am not happy to see him go. Sam was going to be a big part of the offense this upcoming fall. Great to have one of your top receivers coming back, especially transition to a new coach, Willie Fritz. Sounds like after spring ball, things might not have been going his way. I'm sure NIL dollars have something to do with it as well. Always seems to come back to a handful of things, never just one thing. But Sam Brown and his 62 catches, 815 yards are moving on in the transfer portal. We'll be breaking it down each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. I'm aware he could be going. Who could be coming in to replace him? Do they even need someone to replace him? So make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you know live. Locked On Cougs is proud to be Locked On Podcast. I'm your team, our Houston Cougars, even without Sam Brown, every day. Go Cougs.
So for Sam Brown, he was a class of 2020 guy. He's been in college football for a minute. Now, back in 2020, he committed originally to West Virginia. Do you think Neil Brown wants to pick up the phone and say, hey, what you doing? Saw your names in the transfer portal there. Big 12, to my knowledge, doesn't have the same restriction that the SEC does about transferring from one SEC team to another. Remember, those are the Big 12 Houston Cougars who are losing one of their top wide receivers projected for this 2024 season. He was also recruited by Florida. That was before Billy Napier and company took charge. But Sam Brown, a guy that can come in and make an impact for your offense. Hope you enjoyed this bonus show. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube right now, if you have not already. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.